Some events don't begin with chaos, they begin quietly. There is a moment late at night when your mind stops racing and starts listening, when the smallest sounds feel closer than they should and the dark feels heavier than it did earlier. That moment is usually when people realize they are not as alone as they thought. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Tales of the Darkness. Stay until the end, because the third note will show you why you should never trust a locked door. Lower the lights and stay where you are. If something in your house feels slightly off, don't check it yet. Just listen. Story 1. The Notes Under the Door. My name is Daniel, and for most of my adult life, I traveled for work and stayed in cheap hotels without thinking about anything except sleeping and leaving early. I never cared where I was as long as the room locked and the shower worked. Places like that felt temporary and neutral, like nothing personal could ever happen there. That mindset stayed with me for years, and it made me careless because I treated every hallway, every door, and every room like they were interchangeable. That changed the night I checked into a small hotel during a training trip and felt something shift the moment I stepped inside. The lobby looked ordinary but worn down. The red carpet was faded and the air smelled heavy, like a place that had been closed too long and reopened without ever being fully aired out. The woman at the front desk handed me my key without saying much and avoided eye contact in a way that felt deliberate. I rode the elevator up, and when the doors opened, the hallway felt wrong in a quiet, flat way. Sound didn't move the way it should, and even my footsteps felt absorbed by the carpet, like the building was trained to keep things muted. My room looked normal at first glance. A bed, a desk, a bathroom, and a window facing the parking lot. I dropped my bag, turned on the TV, and tried to relax because I was exhausted from driving and didn't want my mind to start inventing problems. I showered, left the TV on low, and eventually fell asleep without thinking about the building around me. I woke up to a sound that didn't belong. It was soft and slow, like something thin sliding across the floor. My brain tried to dismiss it and label it as pipes or the ice machine. Then it happened again, and it was closer, slow enough that I could follow it in my head. I stayed still and listened, and when the sound came again, I realized it was right outside my door. I reached over and turned on the lamp and stared at the gap under the door. A folded piece of white paper was sticking out halfway, like someone had pushed it in carefully and stopped. I stood up slowly and picked it up. The handwriting was messy and uneven, like the person rushed or couldn't keep their hand steady. The message was short and said someone was watching me from somewhere inside the hotel. I waited for footsteps or laughter or any noise at all, but the hallway stayed completely silent. That silence felt intentional and heavier than the message itself. I locked the deadbolt and added the chain and sat on the bed with my back against the wall. I kept the lamp on because the darkness felt different now, like it had weight and edges. I tried to convince myself it was a prank, but it didn't feel playful or rushed. It felt patient, like it wasn't in a hurry because it didn't need to be. I thought about calling the front desk, but another thought followed immediately. That whoever did this might work here and might already know exactly where I was, so I stayed quiet and listened. Every small sound in the room made my body tense. The air conditioner clicking, the pipes tapping, the building settling. Each noise felt like cover for something quieter. After a while, the sliding sound came back slower than before, like the person wanted me to hear every second of it. Another folded note appeared under the door, and I hesitated before picking it up because I already knew it would be worse. The second message said the person had been inside my room earlier that day before I arrived, and that they liked watching people sleep in this hotel. That sentence made my chest tighten because it sounded routine, not threatening, like this was something that happened often. I checked the closet under the bed and behind the shower curtain, even though I knew no one would be there. It wasn't about finding someone, it was about convincing myself the room still belonged to me. I sat back down and told myself that if it happened again, I would leave immediately, no matter the time. A long stretch of silence followed and my breathing finally slowed. Part of me thought it was over, and that fear was doing the work for whoever wrote the notes. Then the sound came again, slower than before, almost careful, like someone enjoying the wait. The paper slid through inch by inch, and when I picked it up, my hands were cold and damp. The message was shorter and different, and it said the person was already inside the room with me again. I read it twice and stood completely still, because the worst part wasn't the words, it was the way they forced me to doubt what I could see. I turned slowly and scanned the room again. The corners, the closet, the curtains, the bathroom doorway. Everything looked exactly the same, and that made it worse because it meant if someone was there, they knew how to stay unseen. I grabbed my bag and checked the hallway through the peephole. It looked empty and still. I unlatched the chain, opened the door quickly, stepped out, and pulled it shut behind me. I walked fast toward the stairs, and when I looked back, once I saw a shadow pull away at the far end of the hallway, like it had been waiting for me to notice. I went downstairs and told the front desk worker what happened. His confusion felt controlled and practiced. He said there were only a few guests and offered another room or an There is a point during long drives when the road stops feeling like movement and starts feeling like repetition. When your body keeps going but your mind drifts into a narrow space where nothing feels urgent anymore. And that's usually when people make decisions without thinking about consequences. Story 2. The Door Handle. My name is Michael, and I drive long distances for work, often enough that stopping at roadside hotels became routine for me. I never looked for comfort or atmosphere. I only needed a locked door and a few hours of sleep before getting back on the road. Places like that felt interchangeable and safe because they were temporary. That night I had been driving longer than I should have, and my vision was starting to blur, so I pulled off the highway and chose a basic-looking hotel with a dim sign and a parking lot that had only a few cars spread far apart. Most of the building looked dark from the outside, and that felt normal at the time. Inside the lobby, the air smelled like old cleaner and warm electronics. The man at the front desk barely looked up when I checked in. He slid my key across the counter and spoke in a low, tired voice, like he had already decided I was not someone worth remembering. He didn't mention other guests or noise or anything that makes a place feel occupied. He just pointed toward the elevator when I asked. I rode up, and when the doors opened, the hallway felt narrow and dim. The lights buzzed faintly, and every door looked identical. The carpet was worn down the middle, and my footsteps sounded louder than they should have in the stillness. My room was at the end of the hall, and at first I liked that, because it meant fewer people passing by. I didn't think about what it also meant later. I opened the door and the room looked clean enough. But after a few seconds, small details started to bother me. The desk lamp was tilted slightly. One drawer wasn't fully closed, and the blanket on the bed had a wrinkle near the corner like someone had just stood up. I told myself it was sloppy cleaning and set my bag on the chair. I turned on the TV and kept the volume low because the building felt too quiet and I didn't want my room to stand out. I checked the lock and the deadbolt and then checked them again because the door closed softly instead of firmly, like the latch didn't grab unless you pulled it. I forced myself to stop thinking about it and got into bed. I left the TV on because the darkness in that room felt heavier than it should have. I fell asleep and woke up to a sound that didn't belong. It was faint and careful, the door handle turning slowly, not the quick twist of someone with the wrong room, more like someone testing it without wanting to be heard. I stared at the door and watched the handle move just enough to confirm I wasn't imagining it. It stopped. Then after a pause, it moved again with the same slow pressure, then stopped again. I held my breath and listened for footsteps or voices, but the hallway stayed silent, and that silence felt controlled, like it was being held on purpose. A moment later, I heard a quiet metallic scrape and realized and the sound stopped at once, like whoever was making it noticed the change in my breathing. I sat up slowly and looked toward my bag, and in the dim light, I could make out a darker shape near it, not clear enough to describe, just something that didn't belong in the room. I asked who was there, and my voice came out low and unsteady. There was a pause, and then a calm voice answered, saying it was housekeeping and they would leave now. The tone was flat and practiced, and that made my stomach tighten. I didn't answer and watched the shape move toward the door. The door opened and closed softly, and the room went still again, like nothing had happened. I reached for the lamp and turned it on, and the light made the room look ordinary again. But my bag didn't. The zipper was open, pockets were shifted, small items were moved around without anything missing, which felt worse than theft. I stood there trying to decide what to do, and realized the fear wasn't sharp anymore. It was steady and pressing like weight. I called the front desk and told them someone had entered my room. The voice on the phone sounded confused and said no housekeeping staff was working and no one else should have access. I didn't stay to argue. I grabbed my things and left the room immediately and walked fast down the hallway, checking behind me because I expected to see a door open or a shadow move. I took the stairs instead of the elevator, and when I reached the lobby, the front desk worker looked surprised to see me. His reaction didn't match concern. It felt contained. I called for help and waited while he avoided eye contact. Later footage showed a man moving slowly along the hallway earlier, stopping near doors, leaning in like he was listening, leaving and coming back again, then unlocking my door and entering without hesitation. I left before sunrise and slept in my car because I didn't trust another room. What stays with me isn't just that someone entered my room. It's how careful the handle turned and how close the door came to opening the first time, like it was testing how ready I was. Some events don't begin with chaos. They begin quietly. There are nights when silence stops feeling like rest and starts feeling like pressure, when being alone no longer feels neutral, and your thoughts slow down just enough for you to notice everything you usually ignore. Those nights tend to reveal things people don't want to acknowledge. Story 3. The Closet Door. My name is Andrew, and at that time I worked night shifts for a delivery company. On my days off, I avoided people and noise because my body felt out of sync with the rest of the world. I didn't want excitement or distraction, just distance and quiet where nothing expected anything from me. I chose a cheap hotel near a trail because it was simple and temporary. When I walked into the lobby, the smell of old carpet and disinfectant hit me immediately and stayed there. The kind of smell that never leaves, no matter how long you stand still. The woman at the desk checked me in and mentioned casually that housekeeping had already finished for the night. She said it like it was a detail I should already know. I nodded and didn't ask questions because I only wanted a key and a room. My room was on the upper floor, and as I walked down the hallway, the lights flickered once and then steadied. The building felt too quiet in a clean, empty way. No televisions, no voices, no doors closing, just the low hum of the lights following me. Inside the room, everything looked normal at first. The bed was made tight, the bathroom looked clean, the air felt slightly cold even though it was warm outside. I noticed the pillow on the chair was crooked and straightened it without thinking because disorder made me uneasy when I was tired. I turned on the TV and ate snacks on the bed and tried to let the noise fill the space. Then I took a shower, and when I came out the mirror fogged and the room felt colder than before. Not a rush of air, just a steady drop that stayed. I checked the thermostat, and nothing looked wrong, so I told myself my body was reacting to water and fatigue. I got into bed and stared at the dark corner near the closet because the shadow there felt deeper than the rest of the room. The closet door was open, and the inside looked empty, but the darkness behind it felt heavier than it should. I forced my eyes closed, and eventually sleep took over. I woke up to a sound that barely registered at first, like fabric brushing carpet. My mind tried to dismiss it as a dream until I heard breathing that wasn't mine, slow and heavy and too close. It came from near the closet and carried weight with it like someone standing still but struggling to stay quiet. I didn't move and listened. The breathing continued for several seconds and then stopped the moment my body shifted slightly. That instant reaction made fear settle in my chest because it meant whatever it was responded to me. I sat up slowly and looked toward the closet. The room was dim with faint light coming through the curtains, and at first nothing looked different. Then I noticed the closet door wasn't the way I remembered it. Earlier it had been fully open, and now it was partially closed, leaving a narrow gap like someone had pulled it inward and stopped. I stared at that gap and waited for the breathing to return. It didn't. The silence felt thick and pressed against my ears. I told myself it could have moved on its own. Loose hinges, air, pressure, anything that didn't involve another presence, but the room felt too still for that explanation. I got out of bed and moved backward toward the door without turning my back on the closet. My feet were cold on the carpet and my hands shook slightly as I reached the handle and stepped into the hallway. The hallway was empty and quiet, and the quiet out there felt worse because it made my room feel sealed behind me, like something had been contained inside it. I went to the front desk and found it empty. The desk phone rang somewhere behind the counter, and no one answered. The sound repeated calmly, and it made the building feel unattended. After a moment, the woman from earlier came out looking tired and confused. I told her someone was in my room, and she said housekeeping was gone and no one else should have keys. Her calm tone made me doubt myself even while my chest stayed tight. I asked her to come check, and she agreed. We went back upstairs together and she entered first. She checked the bathroom, the curtains, and under the bed, then walked to the closet and pulled it fully open like she was proving a point. It was empty, and the door rested open again like nothing had happened. She suggested I might have woken up confused, and I didn't argue because I wanted distance more than validation. I asked for another room, and she gave me a new key farther down the hall. She said it was quieter there, which felt strange because the entire floor felt quiet already. I moved my things quickly and locked the door. I checked the closet first and left it open on purpose so I would know if it moved. Then I sat on the bed and listened. I tried to convince myself I was safe now. Different door, different lock, different space, but the building still felt too still, like it was holding its breath. I drifted in and out of sleep, and every time I started to relax, I found myself listening for breathing. My own breathing sounded loud and unfamiliar. After a long stretch of nothing, I started to feel foolish, and that's when I heard the sound that made my body go cold. Wheels squeaking slowly on carpet moving down the hallway. The sound of a housekeeping cart being pushed without urgency. The wheels stopped right outside my door, and I held my breath. Then I heard heavy breathing on the other side of the door, close enough to feel the same uneven, controlled breathing I heard near the closet earlier. I didn't move because my phone was across the room and reaching for it would mean making noise. I didn't want whoever was outside to know where I was. The breathing continued, and then I felt a soft pressure against the door, like a palm resting there, not knocking, just feeling the surface. The pressure moved slightly, like the hand was sliding along the wood. I stared at the handle, waiting for it to turn, and when it didn't, the silence stretched until the cart wheels squeaked again and slowly moved away. I stayed frozen long after the sound faded because I didn't trust that it was gone. When I finally looked through the peephole, the hallway was empty. No cart, no person, just dim lights and closed doors. I locked the chain and pushed the chair against the door because I needed noise more than protection. Then I sat fully dressed and watched the open closet until the sky began to lighten. In the morning, I checked out immediately and told the man at the desk what happened. He looked at me like he already knew the story and said they hadn't had a night housekeeper for a while because the woman who worked nights stopped showing up. He said the staff covered cleaning when they could. I asked if she had keys, and he said yes, like it was obvious. I left without looking back. What stays with me isn't just the closet door moving. It's the feeling that whatever was breathing in that building wasn't improvising. It was following a routine, and I happened to be there when it repeated. Some events don't begin with chaos. They begin quietly. There are jobs where repetition becomes invisible, where you walk the same halls, hear the same sounds, and stop noticing them. And that familiarity creates the illusion that nothing unexpected can happen because everything already feels known. Story 4. The Pool Room. My name is Jason, and I work at a hotel as a house person, which means I handle maintenance tasks, help housekeeping, and support the front desk when needed. I had worked there long enough to know the building's routines so well that I could tell what was happening just by listening. I knew when an elevator stopped, when a door closed, when a guest walked past the desk, and nothing about the place had ever frightened me before that night. Night shifts were usually slow and predictable, and I liked them because nothing changed. Recently, my schedule had shifted because a new front desk worker was covering nights. For privacy, I'll call her Brianna. She was quiet and polite and still learning the rhythm of the building. That night felt stretched out the way slow shifts do. The lobby lights were low, the hallways were empty, and the hotel felt half asleep. We talked quietly and handled small tasks that didn't matter much. At some point, I went to check the pool area because part of my job was making sure towels were stocked and the room stayed clean. Guests needed to sign out a pool key, which meant no one should have been inside without us knowing. I unlocked the pool door and stepped in, and the air felt heavier and warmer than the rest of the hotel. The lights reflected off the still water, and every sound echoed back twice. Even my breathing felt louder. I went into the small storage room connected to the pool to grab towels, and as I bent down to pick up the last stack, I heard something hit the water behind me. It was loud enough to make me jump and drop what I was holding. I rushed back out, expecting to see a guest or the door swinging, but the pool area was empty. The only thing floating in the water was a lifesaver drifting near the center like it had just been thrown in. There was no reason for it to be there, and no way it could have fallen on its own. The hooks on the wall were still in place. I pulled it out and left the room without standing there too long. I didn't tell Brianna because she was new, and I didn't want to sound like I was imagining things. The rest of the shift passed quietly, but I couldn't stop thinking about the pool. Every time I passed that hallway, I listened for water movement, even though I knew the room should be empty. Later, I got a maintenance slip for a toilet that wasn't working in a room on an upper floor. Brianna told me the guest wouldn't be arriving for a while, so the room should be empty. When I opened the door, the room felt colder than the hallway, even though the building was warm. I went straight to the bathroom and started working. While I focused on the tank, the temperature dropped suddenly like cold air pressed into the room. My skin tightened, and the hair on my arms lifted. I stood still trying to find the source. No vents were running, and nothing made sense. After a moment, the air returned to normal, and I told myself it was just my body reacting. I checked the thermostat and didn't like what it showed, but I wanted to finish and leave. As I worked, the sound of water helped me focus until I heard a heavy thump near the beds. The cold pressure returned instantly, like the room had tightened around me. I stepped out of the bathroom and saw the room phone hanging off the nightstand. The cord stretched tight, but what froze me was the figure standing in the corner near the bed. It was tall and completely still, darker than the shadows around it, like light didn't settle on it properly. I couldn't see features or clothing, just the shape of something that shouldn't have been there. My chest locked up and the silence pressed against my ears. When it moved, it was subtle, just enough to confirm it wasn't a shadow. I ran without thinking. I slammed the door behind me and took the stairs because the elevator felt too slow. When I reached the desk, I told Brianna I was leaving and didn't explain why because I couldn't form the words. I went home and didn't sleep much. The image stayed with me, and so did the pool. The next day, everything looked normal again, but I avoided the pool area without meaning to. My body reacted before my thoughts did. A few nights later, I was back on shift and things were quiet again. Brianna mentioned a guest complaining about cold spots in their room and asked if I could check it later. The way she said it made my stomach tighten. I waited longer than I needed to before going. I listened to the building the way I always had, and the silence felt familiar now. The room didn't feel as cold as before, but the air felt heavy. The pressure returned, like something filling the space. I didn't look toward the corner and finished quickly. After that, I asked to change shifts and eventually stopped working nights altogether. Nothing like that has happened since, but what stays with me is how the pool felt warmer than it should have, and how the figure didn't react like it was surprised. It felt like I had interrupted something that was already in progress. Closing Tales of the Darkness. That's it for tonight's stories on Tales of the Darkness. If you're still here, it means the silence in your room has started to feel heavy. That's the signal. That's when the walls start